This week on Sprague Woodturning, we're going to continue on with the roughing out video. This week we're going to take those bowl blanks that we processed last week and turn them into roughed out bowls. Along with that, we're going to do some coring, and I'll show you how to prevent your bowls from cracking. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. Last week we took basically logs and converted them into bowl blanks. If you haven't watched that video, I would suggest watching that before watching this one. But essentially, we've got some butternut, some maple, some walnut, and a spruce or pine burl that we're going to see if we can rescue. Hopefully there's no pitch in it. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to take these bowl blanks and turn them into bowls that are ready for the drying shed. I'm a twice turn turner, so this is the first part of the twice turn. So what we're going to do is get a bowl mounted on the lathe, and we will go from there. I should also mention that I didn't show this last week, but these are some walnut pieces that I cut up outside, and they'll make great casting pieces just from the shape of them. So I don't know, this is a maple. We may or not stick one of these on the lathe and try and trim it down. And of course, here are all the casting pieces from last week as well. All right, let's get our first piece on the lathe and we'll go from there. So I am a big fan of one-way chucks and live centers. This is the Stronghold chuck. You can get this drive center that goes into the chuck. This is the way that I really like to do how to rough out bowls. I pinch them between centers, and then by doing that, you can line up the grain and make the bowl look more balanced. The one thing that's really good about this chuck, or the drive center I should say, is that it's a spring-loaded pin. So you can push your work onto it along with the live center that's on the tailstock here and adjust your work to line up the grain properly. So what I have here is a piece of maple, and what I'm going to do, so here is the hole from the circle cutting jig on my bandsaw. That goes on the pin on the drive center. And then what you do is just bring up the tailstock and tighten it down just a little bit. You don't want the teeth to really engage on this side. And then, so you hear me talk about balance. Balance is really important as far as I'm concerned when you're looking at, so if you look at a bowl that's on a table and you've got really wide growth rings on one side and really tight ones on the other, then you know that's what I mean by balance. So the pith of the wood was right here, the very center of the tree. The heart of the tree was right here. And when I cut this piece off, I didn't get it cut off perfectly straight. I'm off by probably 1/4 of an inch. So you can see how hopefully you can see, the rings are a lot tighter here than they are on this side. So the way to correct that is to loosen the tailstock off, and there's our wide ones, and there's our, and just tilt it up a little bit, bring up the tailstock again, and what I like to do is use the banjo here, and I just put my finger on the banjo and visualize the blank up against it until I see that the grain basically lines up the way that I want it to. And that is pretty darn close to being exactly where I want it to be. And what I'll do is I'll try and scribe a pencil line on here so you can see this. Actually, a marker is probably better. So what I'll do is I'm just going to place the marker right on the very edge here. So there's our scribe mark. It's a little hard to do, but anyway, it's coming up and then disappears off of here. And if you look at where that goes, now the rings on the bowl are going to be virtually the same on each side. So that's what I mean by balance, and I'm hoping that the camera's picking that up and you guys are seeing that. It's not absolutely crucial, but it's always nice to make it balanced if you can do so. Anyway, once you've got it where you want it, and that's good for me, tighten everything down. And if you want to, you can lock the headstock, or at least I can. Wiggle the piece back and forth. That will push that drive center in a little further along with the live center. Tighten that down, and as long as you've got good solid wood on the inside and on the back side of the bowl, this thing isn't going anywhere. All right, let's show what we're going to be using for tools. All right, so what I have here is the David Ellsworth 5/8 bowl gouge. I have probably 5 that I can sharpen of various different lengths. I really like the swept back grind that comes with the gouge. And so anyway, I've got 3 of them sharpened now, and that way you're not always going to the grinder when you're processing wood, and hopefully you get through it a little faster. Now, this and a parting tool is really all you need to turn bowls. You don't need anything more than that unless you want to get fancier, but as a general rule, all you really need is a bowl gouge and a parting tool, and I'll show you where the parting tool comes into play later on. All right, let's get this shaped into its bowl form. First thing that I usually like to do is get it running true, and then I'll work on the inside of this to make sure that the grain is lined up, because if it isn't, it's no big deal. I just loosen off the tailstock and move the back of the bowl around until it lines up, and as long as it's close, we'll be good to go and do the bottom side of the bowl. So there you go. Even this whole heart section right here looks to be about the same on each side. That's another consideration too. Sometimes the heartwood will go deep into the bowl like this, and the heartwood is usually the darker part of the tree, and then the sapwood that you see here is on the outside of the tree, and eventually this turns into this color as well. But a lot of times there's a heart color discoloration with maple, all the maples that I've worked with anyway. And this one looks to be the same. So I'm happy with that. Now all we got to do is basically clean off the bark area and then get a tenon put on. And I'll tell you why I'm doing that. In most cases, when removing the bark area or the live edge area, the bark is off of this maple because it sat around for a year and a half, which is preferred, by the way. When you go to the lathe, it'll be way easier on your tools. But essentially, once you clean off that live edge area and turn it into a parabolic shape, then there's your bowl. Now these, I've showed these before, these are go, no-go gauges, and they basically fit the smallest set of jaws that I have for my stronghold chuck. And of course, the smallest is the smallest diameter of a hole, and the largest is the largest. And there's your parting tool. That's just to clean up the shoulder so that your chuck fits nice and firmly against the bottom of your bowl. A little bit of shear scraping. So there you have it. That's a classic bowl shape. Sometimes if you've got bug holes, you may want to do more cuts like this. And oddly enough, so a lot of things I've sold over the year were strange looking things. So if it's not the norm, then there's a good chance that maybe it will sell. This has got some spalting in it, not a ton of it, but I suspect that once the Anchorseal goes on this, and I'll get to that afterwards. Once it goes onto this and into the drying shed, it may spalt a little bit further. But that's it in a nutshell. All I do is basically knock these or grind these little nubs off on the top and the bottom of the bowl, and then throw the Anchorseal on it after I date it and see what species it is. So let's do that. I think it's time to sharpen my chisel. Now this piece is 8.5 inches across, and I typically don't like making stuff smaller than 10 inches. So this was in my wood pile, so I thought I would clean it up, and that's just from a business standpoint. But if it's a really nice piece of wood, then of course smaller is fine. But as a general rule, if you're looking for utility bowls, this is probably something that I wouldn't process. I probably would have made cutting boards out of it that I showed last week. All right, so there's the first one. On the bottom, my marker. All I put on here is SM for spalted maple, and then the date. We're at the end of May, so what I'll do is I'll put 6/23. And then that way, it's a quick reference for me to know when the bowl was roughed out and if it's ready to go into the kiln or not. Typically, I like to leave these about 6 months in my drying shed before I start rotating through the kiln. And a couple of reasons for that. Allows the moisture to leave the bowl so that you get less cracking, hopefully no cracking, and it also speeds up time through the kiln. So what I'm going to do is just set this aside, and once I've got a whole bunch of these, I'll throw the Anchorseal on them. And then anyway, I'm just going to set up a time lapse, and if there's something neat that comes up, I will show you what my thought process is on it and why I'm doing what I'm doing. While I never show it, while I'm doing the outside profiles on these bowls, I will take them and throw them on the floor and then cover them with shavings. The shavings are wet, and that will prevent the bowl blanks from cracking until you can get them all processed and the Anchorseal on them. You may be surprised how fast wood will crack when it's just sitting on the bench. Just hours. Apple is a really hard one to work with. You literally in 10 minutes you can see cracks forming on apple when it's fully green. These pieces weren't all that green, so in most cases when you're processing wood, you're going to be sprayed with water. I didn't have any of that issue at all because all the pieces of wood that I have were basically sitting around for at least a year and a half or so. And to give you an idea of the how much water can come out of these pieces when you're turning them, the chop saw station is right in front of my lathe, and you can see that there's a dark spot between the light and where the dust collector is, and that's from years of being sprayed with wood juice, and that's a good 6 feet away. So that gives you an idea how much water can be in these pieces when you're roughing them out. So this is a maple bowl, and this is you're going to find this when you're processing wood. This has got some really nice spalting in it, and I don't want to lose the bowl. It's a crotch piece, so here's the two upper parts of it, and there's the lower part. But we've got some cracks. There's actually some grain that's missing there, and this is a good piece that what I want to do is keep these cracks from migrating. And I'm going to do that with the Starbond Thin. And of course, I'll be using some accelerator on it as well. So if I notice this stuff when I'm roughing bowls out, typically I want to cut that out of my work, but I like the profile of this and I like the spalting, so I'm going to just hit it with the CA glue. And then after this piece dries, maybe this will be a candidate to have this cut out and have an inlay put in it, or whatever, just finish it out the way it is. This side actually looks really nice, and you should be able to see some really nice figurative grain on the inside of this too. So that's another reason to save this piece and not cut this away. I was doing some of the filming with my GoPro, and the GoPro does not like the heat. And if it gets, the last few days that I've been processing the wood, it's been actually really hot in the workshop. So you might see a little bit of stuff with the video, but you know, it's nothing too major. So when I was traveling around doing shows, my typical roughing out time was January, February, and parts of March. Reason for that is because typically there was no shows then, and to be honest with you, I would sooner process wood when it's cold out than when it's warm like it is now. You certainly don't have to deal with any bugs, and as long as you dress for the weather, it's not really that big of a deal either. The main reason that I like to do it then as well is because in the wintertime, a lot of the moisture is out of the tree. The tree has dropped its leaves like it does here in Canada, and the wood is actually a lot drier then than it would be in the middle of spring or summer. So that's another consideration. If you cut your wood in the wintertime, it will actually dry faster than if you cut it in the summertime. And the other thing about cutting wood in the summertime is sometimes it's really hard to keep it from cracking. It's so hot that regardless where you put your blanks to dry, there's a chance that you may end up losing them to cracking. And by the way, an acceptable loss is from 10 to 20% of the blanks you rough out. Now, of course, I've in the past worked with a lot of cracks, as you know. I've shown you how to fix cracks on here. But a lot of wood turners don't like to use CA glue, and they don't want any type of inlay. So, you know, if you're in that category, you may have to cut more bowl blanks than you ordinarily would to get through that year's selling period, if you will. Also, along with that, if your wood sits around if it isn't fresh cut, say cut in the wintertime and then processed then, the longer the wood sits around, the more likelihood you're going to develop cracks in it. So when your logs are out there waiting to be processed, you don't want to be stripping any bark off them, because what will happen is the sun can get at the surface of the wood, and then the clock sticking, it's going to start cracking. There's some examples of it here in this video that we'll see. And so, you know, that it's I know a lot of wood turners that kind of just maybe process once a year like I did, and then there's some wood turners that kind of process throughout the year. Probably a change of pace, because I really do like roughing out. It's one of the favorite things that I like about wood turning. Beauty. So when I'm roughing out, I typically do all the outside on all of the bowls, and once that's done, then I start to either core them or just take the inside out on the lathe. Now, you just can't leave this like this, because if you do, it's going to crack. So that's why you need a product like this. This is Anchorseal by UC Coatings. I know I covered this last week, but it is essentially a liquid wax that goes on white. I've got some in this tray right here, and it dries clear. And that prevents the wood from losing moisture too fast, preventing cracking. That's it in a nutshell. Now what I do is I put it all over the outside of the bowl. I don't so much worry about the top side. Again, beautiful crotch piece there. And then I stack them and let it dry. This is a roller. You can use a brush if you wish. I find that the roller actually works better. So that's why I use it. And I go all over, cover the entire piece on the outside. I don't put it thick around here because we're going to be grabbing the tenon with the chuck when it comes time to either core them or take the inside out. And that's it. Set that one down. I just like putting them on top of another bowl so that it's elevated and easier to work on. According to UC Coatings, 2 applications of this is preferred. I personally find that just putting 1 application on seems to work for me. But hey, if you want to put 2 on, go for it. So I will say that it's been pretty light on the burls lately. But guy from up the road stopped in here a couple days ago and said that he had taken a maple tree down and wanted to know if I wanted the burls off of it. So I'm going to go up and have a look at it tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be able to add to our burl pile for this video, because we really don't have much for burl other than that pine or spruce burl, whatever it is. And when you've got smaller pieces like this, sometimes it's nice to turn them into different shapes than what you normally would do. There, as far as this is concerned, I just wrap the roller up in a bag just like you would if you're doing latex paint. That way it won't cure. And for the big tray, let's just throw it inside of a big bag. Now, if this was going to stay here for a long length of time, I would pour it back into the container. But we're going to be using this again tomorrow, so it won't cure up just overnight when it's got a bag over top of it. There. We got a late start today. I don't know if I'll be doing any filming of getting that burl tomorrow. We'll see how that goes. I don't know if he wants any cameras. So anyway, either way, we'll either be in the workshop or I'll show you my burl haul, if it is a burl haul. See you then. I forgot to mention this as well, that when I leave for the day, I cover the bowl blanks back down, and I just throw some shavings on top of them just to cut down the airflow to them. That way the moisture won't leave them and crack. Now we'll see you tomorrow. All right, back at it again today. I went up and looked at that tree, and while it is a really large maple tree, I would say 20 to 24 inches, and it looked like it's solid. And I would have taken it if I was still doing production work, but I didn't really see any burls. There were some smaller crotch pieces, and that might have been what he was talking about. But anyway, it's just not in my, it's not in the category of things that I need anymore, so I just had to pass on it. But I definitely would have if I was still doing production work. All right, so this is a big maple crotch. Let's get a look at this. That's pretty much perfect right there. So as you watch me turn this piece of maple, I have news. My wife and I have decided to move back to our home province of New Brunswick. And if you're not familiar, New Brunswick is on the east coast of Canada. The reason why we live here in Ontario, in Petawawa, is because there's a big army base here. And I was posted here in 2005 and retired in 2012. Our children grew up in this area, so they kind of see it more like home than we do, I'll say that. So it's going to be tough to leave them behind, and of course leave some really good friends behind to move to New Brunswick. But I guess the good thing about it is I'll be getting a brand new workshop that is much larger than the one that I currently have now, and we'll also be building a new house. Now that's not going to happen until the spring of 24, so don't everybody panic. I hope to have no channel disruptions. We have a builder lined up. We may have been able to do this last year, but the builder that we wanted was booked. And this is a trusted family friend, so we're hoping that everything goes well with that. I'm sure that it will. And so the build will start in the spring, and hopefully by summer, midsummer at the latest, everything will be done. Now the priority is the workshop. You gotta have your priorities, and the priority is the workshop. And the main reason for that is so that I can keep shooting YouTube videos. So I'm really hoping that there's not going to be any channel disruptions. That's the plan as it stands right now. But anyway, that's what's going to be coming up next year. So I'm definitely going to try and shoot some videos ahead. And unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to actually be there when the majority of the building is happening, but I certainly will be able to show that. Those are those cracks I was telling you about. That wood was sitting there in the sun without the bark on it. And when there's no bark on it, even in the shade, they will crack. So if you can store your logs with the bark on them, that is preferred. So that's a little bit of news. It was a really tough decision to make. I'm not going to lie to you on that. We really torn between leaving here and moving back to New Brunswick, but that's what's coming up. So it'll be interesting to see a revamped workshop and essentially laying it out so that it will serve me in the future, because I might want to get into bigger and better things as well. But that's all down the road. We'll have to see. So it's a shame that those cracks are actually in this piece, because we really lost a lot of volume out of this. I had to take at least an inch off the bottom of this in order to get rid of those cracks. I prefer to not send bowls to the drying shed with cracks. If they crack while drying, then so be it. But as a general rule, I typically try to get rid of any cracking prior to it being sealed up with the Anchorseal and then put into the drying shed. Since this is a larger piece, I want it to have a larger tenon on it, so that's what I'm doing here. If it's 12 inches and below, I typically will use the smaller tenon. But in this case, this is a pretty hefty piece. And you can see that the cracks are now gone. And that's definitely what you want before you put the Anchorseal on. There's a nice size maple bowl. Measure this, see how big it is. Well, it's almost 14 inches. There'll actually be some nice figurative grain down inside of this because this crotch goes quite deep inside of this piece. Anyway, let's do the pine burl, and then I'll probably just bring you back when I'm all done unless something interesting happens. While the pine burl was probably lighter than the maple bowl that I just turned, it was larger and it was a little more out of balance. So that's lower RPM at 150. You know, once things get rounded, typically you can up the RPM. But this stuff, when I was putting had the drive center in it and the live center, it was just sinking further and further in, and that's another reason why, like I think I said this last week, that I'll never use softwoods as waste blocks because they're just not strong enough. My current workshop is 28 by 32 and I have outgrown it. If we were to actually stay here, I would seriously consider putting on an extension. The new workshop is going to be 36 by 50, and it's going to have a 12-foot carport on one end so that I can park my tractor underneath of it. And right now it's in a tent, and I don't know. I'm really looking forward to having it under a hard structure. Now, the other thing that's really missing in my workshop here is a bathroom. So we're going to put just a toilet and an industrial sink in there, along with a small water heater. That way, in the wintertime, I can warm up the epoxy jugs inside of the sink, and that way it flows better. I'm going to be having a showroom, essentially, which will be in my packing room, kind of the way when you walk into my clean room now. That's what that's going to be. I don't know if I have anything to show because I have a really hard time keeping anything in stock, which is a good problem to have. But along with that, so there's going to be a bathroom, there's going to be the packing room / showroom, and then I'm going to have a casting room. That's going to be a big improvement from what I do now, because I more or less just do all my casting in the workshop, and it's a really dusty environment. So I want to get that into a room, keep things clean and relatively dust free, and no wood heat. Finding it harder and harder to get insurance for, basically a business setting that's using wood heat. So I'll probably be switching to, I don't know, propane, heat pump, not sure. AC, sure, it'd be nice too. Okay, well, anyway, I decided to go this direction because of those sticks, and I mostly do burls natural edge anyway. I don't know if this is a waste of time. A little bit of spalting there. Don't typically see spalting in pine all that much, or spruce. I'm thinking this might be spruce. A little bit there. That's where one of the branches was. I don't know. We'll attempt to core it. Hopefully this tenon will survive. I typically don't like using softwood for tenons, so we'll see how that works out. Anyway, I'm just going to bash on, and if anything exciting or cool happens, I'll bring it back. And hopefully I'll be able to push through these and get them all done today, and then we'll do coring tomorrow. It's the end of the day. There's, I think, 11 bowl blanks left over there now. Not too bad. A lot of nice figurative grain in these. Before I throw the Anchorseal on them, I'll show them to you. A lot of the crotchwood pieces are just really hard, and it took a long time to do, or else I would have had more done. All right, I'm not going to bother showing the spruce burl. I'm going to call it a spruce burl, not a pine burl. We already looked at that. This is a piece of walnut, beautiful crotch figure in it. The only problem with it is there's a little knot here in the bottom. No big deal. So there's that. This is butternut, and this is the half of the log that I didn't think we're going to be able to get anything out of. I didn't put a foot on the very bottom of it, and the reason for that is because I'm going to treat this like a casting piece. So I'll dry this as it is. Of course, I'm showing these now because when the Anchorseal goes on, these are going to be really hard to see. This is a big walnut crotch. The figure is going to go deep down inside of the bowl, as you can see here. Nothing much else. There is other crotch grain, but it's up near the rim on this piece. I don't know if you can see how my fingers are stained. That happens with basically wood juice, if you will. It comes out and it reacts with the steel, and it causes your fingers to turn black, or your hands to turn black. These pieces aren't too bad because there's actually hardly any moisture coming out of these. But in a lot of cases, if they're fresh cut, your hands will be black. And the way to get rid of that, if you didn't know, is to just use lemon juice. It actually neutralizes the color in it. Throw that up there for now. Oh. Another big, beautiful maple crotch here. figure is going to go way down into this casting, so that's good. We'll be able to see that on both sides of it. Another maple crotch, nothing. I don't know. It's got some really nice figurative grain on the backside of it, that's for sure. So I guess it is something to write home about. Same thing with this one. Lots of really, really nice maple crotches in this stack of wood. Do have some bug holes. This is another reason why you should be kiln drying your bowls to get rid of any insects that may be in them. I hear denatured alcohol works as well. Spalted maple. Nothing too exciting. Some more of that beautiful crotch. This is maple again. And all that chatoyance goes deep down inside of the casting. And we'll have a fill-in area there. I have a fill-in area on most of these actually. This is the large walnut. Now, with walnut, it looks kind of purple, but it will dry black. So this is black walnut, but a lot of times when you're roughing it out in areas like this, well, this will all fade to black, and this is going to be a beautiful bowl. It is flawless, and this is the piece that the burl was on. The other side. All right, I'm going to throw the Anchorseal on these, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. Thought we'd get a look at this last batch that I just roughed out. This is Butternut. Got a ton of sapwood on it. All that white is sapwood. Got a void there. I figured that I would leave it. Good candidate for resin later on. This is actually the other side of it, and this is going to be another casting piece. Now that I'm doing resin casting, I kind of look at pieces of wood differently than I used to. To be quite honest with you, in the past, this would have been firewood. And like I said, Butternut doesn't even make all that great firewood. This is the other burl. There is a crack in it. I decided to turn it in this orientation. It's actually kind of backwards. This was the top outer part of the burl. That there is actually kind of neat. See how tight the rings are on that tiny little branch? It's actually quite hard. That little branch is probably about 12 years old, and look at this, look how small it is. So again, I don't know if this is going to produce anything, but I will I'll continue roughing out. We'll see. Again, just more amazing crotch pieces. Nice spalting as well. Yet again, maple crotch. Can't go wrong with a good crotch, people. Can't go wrong with a good crotch. There. This one's actually really nice. And by the looks of it, it's not too deep down in the casting. Oh, there's. Shouldn't say casting. That far. So we definitely have a bunch of it and some really nice spalting as well. More walnut. Beauty. We should just call this the crotch video. Last one. I've got walnut on there, but this is actually butternut. I'll have to change that up. A lot of heavy sapwood in that butternut tree. All right, well that's it. I'm going to throw the Anchorseal on these, and next up will be coring. We are all set up and ready for coring. This is the one-way coring rig. I got my number 2 knife set in, and of course my Core Pro cutter from Hunter Tool Systems. Totally awesome. I do have templates cut, so we're using the number 2 knife set, and I've got a bunch of these templates cut for the different knife sets, and that just gives you a rough idea how far to move the base of the rig back. If you go to oneway.ca, Dale Nish lays out the whole process of how to core your bowls and the setback from the headstock or from the banjo. I highly recommend doing that. So that's oneway.ca, and it's in their media section at the bottom of the page. Rule of thumb is for every 10 inches in diameter, you want your bowls an inch thick. This is 11 inches. I measured this out. I just cut this with the cutter so we could see it easy. This is about 1.5 inches. I typically do that because most of my bowls have inlays in the rim like this. So I need that thickness at the rim when it's drying. All right, so we're going to do this one, and then I might set up a time lapse for the other ones. I think I've seen about maybe 8 or 10 that we need to core. I'm probably only going to be doing the one blank. I'm not going to be going for anything smaller than that. It's just really not worth my time. All right, let's get it done. This is one of the biggest ways to put money back in your pocket, and that is to core. Now, it would be a shame to see that centerpiece, and even though that's smaller than the 10 inches in diameter, because of the grain, it's a valuable piece of wood. So when that piece of wood is finished, it's probably in the $80 category, somewhere around there. And if you have 10 pieces like that, well, you've just put $800 back in your pocket. So a coring rig, especially one that uses the Core Pro cutter from Hunter Tool Systems, and I'll remind you that there's a link in the description to get 10% off your next order. You're throwing money away. I know that the initial cost of the Core Pro cutter and the coring rig is up there, but the first time that you use it in a setting like this, you can probably pay for it. And then, of course, you've got it for the future. Now, this is a quick and easy way to put a tenon back on the bowl. The core that came out of the mother bowl, I'll call it, you can just use it as a friction drive, cut another tenon, and then it's ready to go outboard in my case because I'm left-handed, or for you righties, inboard, to be finished. Don't forget to true up that tenon. And there you go, just grind off the little nub on the bottom, and you could probably even just put the Anchorseal on this and throw it in the drying shed, because that is exactly what I did with a bunch of these. This is a time lapse of me basically doing all the coring here, and this is the number 2 knife set. You can see the spacer that's down on the deck, and of course if you're using the number 3, well, the number 3 is a larger curvature of the knife, so then the knife will have to be pushed further away from the headstock or the banjo. And mine are set to leave about 1 inch of thickness in the base of the bowl plus the tenon. I don't want to go into the tenon. Now, these aren't very large bowls that I've done. I know that some people may say, well, that's a really big bowl, but in the bowl world, it's not. So if I was working with material that was, say, 18 inches in diameter, I would probably be doing what I'm doing now, go for the largest core, then put a tenon on it, and then mount it back on the lathe, and then cut smaller pieces out of it. The reason for that is because you can use tailstock support when you go for the largest core first. If you're cutting out a smaller bowl from the core and you happen to lose that piece off the lathe, well, that's not really that big of a deal. My main concern is not damaging the large outside money bowl and the large core. If it comes off the lathe later on, because as you move the rig to the right, which is what you're going to have to do even with the number one, you may not be able to get that tailstock support that you need, and the possibility exists that it's going to come off the lathe. It typically doesn't happen with green wood, but when you're working with burl and resin pieces like you've seen me use a number of times while coring, it's really hard to get a good bite on the tenon. So that's why sometimes it will come off the lathe. But as long as you can really torque down on that tenon, which you can with green wood, it's probably good from there. So if you didn't want to use the tailstock support, then you would go into the center, take out a small little bowl. You'd have to lay it all out on the face, and then work your way left. But for me, because these aren't really large pieces, this is the way that I went with it, because I know that there's going to be some people probably wonder why I did it this way, but that's why. And I'm sure there's going to be some people that are disappointed that I'm not taking out these smaller bowls. I've still got the cores. I don't know what I'm going to be doing with them. I've already got a large number of small bowls as it is, and now that we have this move coming up, I just really don't feel the need to add to that. I can certainly add to that when we get to back to New Brunswick. But anyway, you're going to see me reverse this piece like I did earlier. This will be a different view of it. It wasn't really that great of a view the first time I showed it. So I'll show putting the tenon on the bottom of this. And yeah, this was the only piece that I really took 3 pieces out of. It's actually really fast when you do it this way. I wasn't doing this originally. Another way to do this, of course, would be to pinch it between centers and to also hold it with a vacuum chuck. That's fairly fast, but since you're set up, this here is probably faster. So all of the coring is done. Now I'm outboard and just thinning these bowls out again to the 1 inch per 10 inch diameter thickness-ish. And you'll see the spruce burl come up here after this. And one of the main reasons why, other than the fact that it's got pitch in it, it's yellow. If you look at this piece with the Anchorseal on it, and this is typically how it's going to look like with any finish on it, it's going to look yellowy. And that's not desirable at all. In this spruce burl, surprisingly enough, there was only one section of the burl that had some really heavy pitch in it that I never even bothered rounding, just because to me, it's just, I'm skeptical that this is even worth it. So, but I know that there's going to be a lot of people. The last time that I actually shot the video, or pine burls worth buying, there were some people that said like they turned them and they're actually quite beautiful. So I figured we would give this a shot. Since it's not loaded with pitch, should be able to sand this up and finish it in the future. Don't know exactly when that's going to be, but it'll be in my inventory. And I do plan on moving my entire inventory out east. It's going to be a bit of a nightmare because in my drying shed there may be 1,000 bowls drying right now, and a whole bunch of salt and pepper blanks, pepper mill blanks, amongst other wood. So it's going to be a chore to move it, but it's a big investment that I've got, and I definitely want to hold on to it. I could sell it, but I'm not going to. This is some time-lapse footage, and the main reason why I shot this, I know that a lot of people follow my channel because they want to learn how to turn. So this will give you an idea of body position while taking out the inside of the bowl. You'll also see when I enter the wood, I basically go down the face and I do a little indent where the rim is. I don't measure it. I don't see the need for that. You can look at a piece of wood and estimate what its diameter is. And some of these are actually quite quick. Just a couple of passes and that's it. There's that little push to set the rim area. Then most times the gouge itself is on a 45-degree angle. Sometimes it's almost on its side completely when you enter the wood. That's the hardest part, is entering the wood. But once you're into it, then of course you can turn the flutes up if you wish and proceed to the base of the bowl. These semi-enclosed bowls, they can be a little bit of a pain to do. You can do it exactly how I'm doing there, but sometimes I find it's easier just to flip the gouge over like I'm using there, just to hog out the inside of it and take that material out of the belly of the bowl. But you'll see that I often measure. It's important that your bowls have that even wall thickness throughout them when they're drying, because if they don't, if you have a thick area in regards to other areas that are thin, well, those thin areas are going to dry out at a faster rate than those thick areas, and then you can pretty much guarantee that the piece is going to crack. That 10 to 20% loss can be devastating, especially when you're working with really highly figurative woods. But the large outer pieces, the money bowls from the coring, usually it's just a pass or two and then they're done. Unless one like this one's quite thick in the belly, just because of the shape of the bowl, the outer shape of the bowl. If your bowls are shaped, have the same profile as your cutting rig or your coring rig, then you probably won't have to do hardly any cleanup at all. I know some wood turners that actually do it that way, and they don't even, once the core comes out of it, they just throw the end grain sealer on it and throw it on the shelf. They don't even bother cleaning it up any further than that. I did want to take any of the bark and whatever that is that's growing up inside of the crotch area, because there could be bugs in it and fungus or like whatever. It's always best to, it's going to fall out anyway, so I typically will always remove it at this stage before it goes into the drying shed. That's another beautiful black walnut bowl. And the last one that we're going to look at here is that spruce burl. And it did actually have some cracks on the natural edge of it. So I just took some of the thin CA glue and poured it in those cracks. That way, hopefully they won't migrate when it's drying. Because if we're going to finish one on the channel, it's going to be this big one here, but we'll have to see how it comes through the drying process. If it's got some cracks in it, we certainly know how to fix that. But it's like I said, you know, when I put my pieces in the drying shed, I don't want cracks in them before they go there. The last step before these go to the drying shed is to completely cover the bowl on the inside and the rim. I realize that it says that this is an end grain sealer, and this was, of course, developed for the logging industry, where you could coat this on the ends of logs so that they don't crack prior to being milled. But I like to put it on the inside and outside all around the bowl. All right, well, I got about 30 of these to do, and we'll see you tomorrow and we'll finish this video up. Well, all right, that's it for the video. I'm out of time. It's Thursday and I still got to get this edited and uploaded. These bowls here still need to have the insides taken out of them, and then they'll be ready for the drying shed. In total, we got 35 bowls, and I'll tell you the breakdown here. It's 8 walnut, 7 butternut, 3 spruce burls, and 17 maple bowls. This is actually low on the production scale for me. When I was in full production, I was shooting for 60 to 80 bowls a week. That's where I want it to be. The sooner you can get things roughed out and moved on to finish turning, then you're going to make more money. There's absolutely no money in roughing out, only in finish turning. But of course, in order to have the finish turning, you have to do the roughing out. So the sooner you can get that done and moved on, the better, the more money you'll make. I know that there's not a lot of videos like this on YouTube, and this may be my last one as well. As I move forward as a content creator with YouTube, I want to bridge more into the artistic side of wood turning, and I really enjoy roughing out, and I enjoy teaching people how to do this. And I do have a playlist on my channel. If you want to see more videos like this, I think I've got probably 6 videos of roughing out. So there's quite a video library there to have a look. And if you're curious about things, but moving forward, this may be my last one. All right, don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the 3-gallon kit at 100,000. We haven't hit 95,000 yet, hopefully in a couple of weeks. And the giveaway for designer epoxy is only for Canada and the lower 48 US states. Next week, I've got an awesome thing coming up. I'm hoping it's going to be awesome. It's still in the pressure pot. I think it's a cool concept, so we'll have to see if it pans out, because, well, you just never know now, do you? All right, well, that's it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Take care, stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. And of course, that thumbs up will always help with the analytics. See you next week.